Today we're going to talk about the future of Bainbridge Island, and I'm hoping that this is highly interactive. Many of you are observers of the city, or we're all participants, or should be. And we have a number of sort of inflection points going on right now. We have a opening for a city council member, and there I think are 4 applicants right now, and we also have a search underway for a new city manager, and we have an opening on the planning commission, and there's probably more that I don't even know about. So if you can add to this conversation, please do. I welcome you all. I started by asking Wayne Roth if he might join us, because as a former city councilman, he has some perspective of sort of how things work and how they might work better, I hope. One of the challenges of living on this island is, although it's small enough that we all kind of know each other, we don't always know what's going on. And so I also am very happy to see that Sal and Richard from What's Up Bainbridge, who are a couple of gentlemen who have been doing some great work in helping to keep us informed, have joined us to talk a little bit about what they're doing and how we can stay plugged into what's going on. I also know the city has tried through its weekly email newsletter and some mailings to let us know about things that are happening, but it still often comes as a surprise. What's going on? Oh, they're going to have a composting location. I had heard something, but I didn't know what that was, and what is the status of that, and how can I get involved? So we all play a role in trying to make Bainbridge the Bainbridge we want it to be. And so let's talk a little bit today about how we can help to create that future Bainbridge. So as an introduction, Wayne, why don't you talk a little bit about what it's like to try to govern this ungovernable operation and work with other people to make that happen?
Well, good morning. I don't have either a short or long answer, or not even a glib one, but I will say that people on this call pay attention, and most of the islanders, it's the old "in my backyard" awareness that brings them to City Hall. Have no interest in local government until they are personally affected by something that no one told them about. And I'm not saying that's bad or good. It just happens to be how most people get to City Hall for the first time and show up at a council meeting. I enjoy it because every time someone would come to a council meeting for the first time, red-faced and ready to go, there was another person involved in local government. And most come in and get more engaged as they learn more about their issues, whether it's composting at the Triangle property or the shoreline or whatever. I ran for re-election in 2017 and was not re-elected, but I can tell you this about it. We're citizen council people. And it took me 4 years to get to the point where I began to understand municipal government with some knowledge. More important, regional government, Kitsap County, the Puget Sound region, and of course what goes on in Olympia, and all of us are so vitally interconnected. The mayor of Poulsbo, Becky Erickson, once said, "Kitsap County, it's a place where we have a city that acts like a county and a county that acts like a city." And of course, that city acting like a county is Bainbridge, who sees itself, both metaphorically and otherwise, as kind of isolated from the rest of the world. And as I say, until it's in my backyard. So I immensely enjoyed my time. I kind of grateful I wasn't reelected. I took over, I immediately went to Barn, and I'm now president of the Barn board, and am keeping quite busy. I also rejoined the Memorial Board, the Japanese Memorial Board, and we're breaking ground out there for our new departure deck. And are in the final stages of planning for an interpretive center. So I'm keeping busy, but I'm still continued to be interested in local government, and particularly Bainbridge Island. If I could make one more editorial comment, my number one concern about the health of this city and its future is how we preserve Wake Up Bainbridge and its ilk, how we can keep the press engaged and attentive. Government's only as good as a critical press. As you may know, I spent my career in public radio and local journalism, and the Kitsap Sun has a reporter, nice fellow, but you know, when as the Sun keeps being sold and resold, Nathan said, well, I said, I'm so glad you're still reporting on Bainbridge. He said, yeah, but I've lost my editors. Essentially, he's a press release kind of reporter, does not have the time or the resources to really do good reporting and to get ahead of a story. Radio, broadcast television, radio, the Seattle Times are very much focused on the rest of the sound, unless we have a tragic event, in which case the helicopters and the Times may drop in. So the more we can do to, if you don't have a subscription to the Sun, get it. It'll give them some support. You know, they don't do much for us. They give us the Islander every day that goes in everybody's mailbox, or every week, which is good. But I'm very strongly supportive of trying to continue the diligence of a free press and a critical press on good government. So I'm done.
No, that's good. And you didn't mention the Bainbridge Review, which is in a similar state of being sold and resold. And I think that our current reporters are all off island. So Richard Davis, you raised your hand.
I did. I just wanted to thank Wayne for his comments. I've never met Wayne. I don't know Wayne. Hi, Wayne.
Hi, Richard.
I had a little journey, if you will, about knowing what was going on at City Hall and where things were happening. For the 20 some odd years I've been on Bainbridge, I probably paid attention to City Hall for the last 2 years. And the only reason I ever started paying attention to City Hall was because Sal DeRosalia had this idea for Wake Up Bainbridge, and we partnered up, and I became fascinated with it and also began to understand that that's where change is actually happening. When you hear about it in the newspapers, you're hearing about it after 7 meetings, 3 controversies, 15 public hearings, and it looks like a surprise, but it's not a surprise at all. Now, every Tuesday night on Wake Up Bainbridge on Facebook, you can watch the city council meeting with us and about 10 to 20 really interested Bainbridge Island citizens, some former city council members, some people who are going to be running for council. I've been educated in the last 2 years. I was, for 15 years, I didn't even think anything had changed on Bainbridge Island. Did not know. It was a little bit more crowded down by TNC when I went there. But for the most part, I was not in Winslow, and I just ignored it. But I think we ignored it at our own peril. And I think there's actual positive change that can be made the more citizens are involved in that process. And to what degree we contribute to that, good. I'm glad all these long hours are worth something. But that's all I had to say. Thanks a lot for your words there, Wayne.
Well, and maybe you or Sal could talk a little bit about the idea of Wake Up Bainbridge, and it's a nascent new media enterprise, I would say, that can be available on text as well as video, and live or on Memorex. Care to talk, Sal? You want to jump in?
I'll talk about it a little. My name's Sal DeRosalia. I've lived here for 20 years too. And I've paid attention to City Hall for the last 3 years. And I wrote down a note, and I wanted to keep my hands low because I wrote this note and it said, could not agree with Wayne more. And that was before he said, pay attention to Wake Up Bainbridge. And I really mean that. And it's because what he just painted, the story of how most people come to City Hall, is the only reason I got there. It's because I had a very acute issue. The only way I thought I could get any satisfaction was to go down to City Hall. And in the process of sitting there to figure out how to get satisfaction, I heard all these other things. And once I heard those things, I could not unhear them. I also started to understand how almost every single one of them had something to do with me to some degree. And then I started to see how there was not a lot of representation for anybody who was not in that room or who did not directly campaign or were friends with the people who were on that panel. And not to say that they're bad people for that, but unless you are a part of that kind of working group, you don't have a voice so much. Like hopefully they're taking care of what you want taken care of. And so out of that, I didn't know any other way except to create something to publicize it. And people really thought I was crazy, and I think they still do, that I want to turn the city council meeting into a TV show. But the only way to get people to pay attention to what's going on in that room is to make it matter to them. And the only way to make it matter to them was to put it on a TV screen. And so that was the premise behind Wake Up Bainbridge. And, you know, Richard and I certainly editorialize what we hear sometimes. But I would also say that when we're reporting something that's like, you know, real, we really try to, here's the facts and then here's my opinion about what's going on, but we really try to separate the two. And so that's just kind of the premise behind Wake Up Bainbridge and why it exists. And going forward, you know, I really think that we look to, I want to say the word legitimize, but that we are legitimate. What I want to do is I want to be better. I want to be better for the community. I want to be better for me. I want the stories to be better. I want people to feel more comfortable to come on and talk about what's going on, because I feel like that's the only way we're actually going to get the dialogue that needs to happen for everybody's voice to be heard and for the city to really represent all of us. So thank you, Wayne. I really appreciate how you kind of put that in a can for me, because that's exactly how I got to the table.
Well,
And I wonder if there are, oh, go right ahead.
No, I was just going to say, there's my definition of engagement. And I have to say, I do listen to Wake Up Bainbridge from time. I don't listen to it regularly because you know, the big file of podcasts I mean to listen to is I need to prioritize my time better. But you're very good at what you do, and I'm so pleased you can sustain your podcast. So thanks. So.
So there was a question here by Sheila about how do you find Wake Up Bainbridge? I would say the easiest thing is the good old internet. Go to wakeupbainbridge.com and you'll get started.
Yeah, and you can just, if you Google Wake Up Bainbridge, and if you Google Wake Up Bainbridge plus a particular issue on Bainbridge, you'll probably get what we've done on that thing. So anyway, there you
go. Brenda, I see you're here, and I know you've had some engagement with City Hall, and in fact, I see you've even thrown your name in the hat, or is that what you do? Yeah, you throw your name in the hat, isn't that what you do? Anyway, for being considered for the vacant city council seat, which is being opened by Cole Medina's departure. What's your experience about, do you echo what these guys are saying about something brings you there the first time?
Well, you know, in my case, I guess I kind of came in through the back door. There was already an issue happening, and Karen Vargas pretty much told me to come down there. And when Karen tells me to go somewhere, I go, you know, so I'm down there. And
you're not the only one, probably. You're not the only one.
Understand what's going on. And she says, you know, put your name on this list. And I did. And I thought it was just an attendance list. Turned out, and I had to get up there and talk and tell my story. And next thing you know, she's got me with my arm behind my back, and and there I am. So yeah, I have thrown my name into the hat, I guess.
Or your hat in the ring. That's what we do.
Yeah, whatever metaphor you want to use. I've done that, and I have a lot of concerns just like everybody else. And it is due to sitting in on those meetings. You don't know what's going on until you're there, and you don't know how they're doing things until you see it. After they created the Race Equity Task Force, we really got to see how the inner workings work. And it wasn't because everybody told us. It was because everything we tried to do was pretty much getting blocked because there was some rule or something. And, so we had to kind of learn. They kind of just threw us in there, and we had to kind of learn as we went. So one thing that I'd like to see happen, if I get in there, is that there's a better way to onboard people, new people who are trying to get into the city council or on a committee or something like that, because they just throw you out there and you really don't know what you're doing. And I can't stay on long because I am working, but I just wanted to, thank Sal and Richard also for trying to keep people woke. They had me on their show and I did an interview, and a lot of people are always telling me, I heard you on there and it was a great interview. And so thank you for that. So yeah, I got my hat in the ring. I'm thinking that there's a lot of things I'm interested in, low income housing. And when I say that, that's my idea of low income housing, not somebody who's rich idea of low income housing. And sustaining Bainbridge, I'm on the sustainable, task force. And we're working on that. I've done some work with the Planning Commission. And, I got my fingers in a lot of different ponds, and I'd like to kind of coordinate it all into one big circle and take it to the city council and see if we can get some of these things worked on. So I'm just an everyday person. Don't have any ties to anybody, just running on good old fashioned values and the big idea that the city council should be working for the residents and not the other way around. So.
Well, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that your experience there about how one thing leads to another is exactly what Wayne was touching on. Something gets us involved, and then we start to see how many things run through some part of City Hall or another. One of the things that I feel like often happens, and you observers can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think is that you end up with sort of an issue raising its head at that not in my backyard or right at the council decision-making level. And then suddenly the council members are reviewing or revisiting things that have been discussed by other groups for a long time. And I'm wondering how we could, if anybody has any suggestions, any of you who've been around here for a while, about how we could sort of get those things earlier in the process, or is it a matter of our feeder organizations, things like the Planning Commission or other organizations are not actually the sustainable transportation folks or efforts to try to identify affordable housing. You end up at a pivot point, obviously, of the council, and then you find that there's like a lot of room for last minute persuasion. I mean, I'm not opposed to that, except that it seems as though for people who've been working on a project for a year or 6 months or something, to have all that work then be revisited in the heat of a council meeting or two might be challenging. Any thoughts on that? Anybody?
Well, I'll say that in terms of engagement or moving into the being more involved, the advisory groups that the council supports, including the design review board, the utilities group, and so on, are volunteer staffed, or not staffed, but volunteer driven. And often there's newspaper ads to, can't somebody please join? We lack for interest. And some of them require some expertise, but a good way to get started is through the volunteer. We used to have a non-motorized committee I worked with that committee before I ran for office. There are others. The Planning Commission is, this is part of the education of municipal government. What power does the city council actually have? What can it do? Well, the number one thing is zoning. That's the one most powerful tool of the council. There's much else we like that's in the hands of the county or the state that the city has to respond to, like shoreline management, for example. So way to get to understand this dynamic and what can really be done at the council can come in through some of these volunteer groups. I live in Winslow and have spent my life here in town and meeting people and hanging out at various places. And it's that engagement as well that will say, have you thought about and try this or try that? That'll lead you to City Hall ultimately, because there may be some funding in support of a nonprofit that can be activated or engaged. They're just channels in other than running for the council. Typically, well, I'll comment no more on running for the council. It's a messy process in that there are times when we just have we approach people to say, consider running for the council, and you get a oh, I don't want to go there. It's you know, who would want to be on that? All you do is get abused. And frankly, there is that problem with government, and our president, outgoing president, did not do anything to help us on this notion of government can be us, not we, they. There have been council members who address the city using that pronoun, they, and here they are representing the city. We have this notion about how we work together, that somehow there are bright lines that can't be crossed. And I think getting through that, just knowing people, figuring out what they can do and how they can help you and you can help them, is how we all work in other parts of our life. Why not in government? So it works here. It especially works in a place like a city like Bainbridge, where we're all, everybody on this call probably has no greater separation than about 3 degrees, if that. If you didn't bring your kids through the school, maybe it's 4 degrees. But you know, we just are all connected. Reed's daughter and my son went to the senior prom together. You know, there are things like this that you just learn and know about the city, and it's just the next step to be involved in government.
I was going to say, this is Rita Riley. I was going to say, I watched the city council meetings when they were on TV. I used to watch them, and now I'm so happy that they went online and I figured out how to work it. I'm just amazed. I've been on the island, I think, 13 years. And I'm just amazed at when the council changes, or that that there's not a lot of consistency in a lot of things. And then there's the whole study, and you spend all this money and then it gets put on a shelf, and it seems like there's no long-term, I think there's supposed to be some long-term goals, but it doesn't get carried through. And then when you have a council, you know, election for new council members, stuff changes. It seems like there's an awful lot of inconsistency that goes on. And then there's so much, you know, new stuff being added to an agenda. There is just so much. Everybody's got their own little thing. And I understand that, but I'm just amazed at the lack of organization, it seems like sometimes, for the city and for the city council. I'm really disappointed that the city has not done more to help, you know, the local businesses here. This summer, when we had all that beautiful weather, they should have been able to be outside with their tables. They should have closed off part of the streets, I thought. And it seems like they didn't do anything. Those A lot of those people are they're just trying to make it, and if they leave the city, we're not going to have anything for ourselves hardly. And so I am concerned about that. So I guess I'll have to either write or get on Zoom in the meeting. I've resisted doing that simply because it is such a messy process. And people have been so terrible to one another. The council members have been, and it's pretty discouraging. But, you know, I'm old, so I guess I may as well just, you know, get in there and put my 2 cents worth in. So thank you for listening to me.
Rita, always glad to listen to you.
Thanks.
Sal, are you?
Yeah, I have a couple comments. One is I keep thinking I can't agree more. I just really agree with what I'm hearing with everybody saying. One of the things that I think that we kind of as a city need to take into consideration is that there is no requirement for how much a city council member has to work. So they are there. They do as much or as little work as they deem necessary. That's totally dependent on what's going on in their life, if they have a career, if they don't, how interested they are, how much people are engaging with them, how engageable they are. And so sort of, I'm a business owner and I closed a business in the pandemic. I also opened one and invested in one in the pandemic. And so what I would say is just in my time kind of in working with the council, for issues like that, they really require citizens to pick up that mantle and run with it. And all the council is going to be able to do is provide you with a little bit of support or maybe a path for here's how you can get permits for, like if you look in front of Pegasus Coffee, they got outdoor that went into the street. And so that was a whole production of, we're talking to the fire department, we're talking to the city, we're talking to the police station, we're going to get this permitting because nobody's done it before. And I know them, they spent a lot of time, like a lot of human hours and money invested in maybe this works. And the reason I say that is because now there's a blueprint for that. Now, if somebody does that again, there's a blueprint for that, but the council, unless you have 4 council members who happen to be business owners on Winslow, that's not their thing. And I don't even know that they should be responsible for that, because I don't know that I want the council making decisions for business. I think I think that there should be maybe like a business advisory committee, and I really believe that, but I just think that the council people are not necessarily there for that. And it really takes us as residents or citizens or concerned people to have a legitimate argument or a legitimate cause, and then to follow it up over and over and over and over and over again.
Do you think that the city staff might have a role in this too? Sal, or anyone else? What's the city manager and the city staff's role in responding and helping citizens with these challenges? How does that piece of it work?
The technical answer is only what's within code already. They're not there to be creative. They're there to help you figure out the code and how to get from A to B. And maybe somebody's got a different answer, but we don't have a mayor here. And that's one of those issues with the city manager that's really only carrying out the will of the council. We don't have a mayor with an agenda who's trying to lead it's a very different system of government.
Brenda, you raise your hand.
Yeah, I agree with Sal, but I understand what Rita's saying. But what we don't really understand is that we, the residents, we have a lot more power than we give ourselves credit for. If there is something that you want to get done, if it is, having outside eating or something, you can propose that and they can put it on the agenda, and then you can come out and make comments about it. And, like Sal says, over and over and over again. And that's who they're listening to. They're listening to the loudest voices. If they don't hear anything about what your issue is, they assume no, it's not an issue. So you do have a lot of power. And I saw that when they created the Race Equity Task Force. There was a bunch of us there, and they noticed that, and they agreed that no, we're not being represented on the island. And so things like that, you just have to remember that you have more power than you think you do.
Wayne.
Well, I want to give an example of the power. There were a couple of things that when I was elected that I and Val Tollefson and a few others thought we ought to do. One is restore funding to the arts that had been cut off in 2008 and 9, and we were successful in getting the cultural programming going again, a small amount of money that goes to nonprofits and arts. But we also wanted to take advantage of this big piece of property, the Suzuki property at the corner of Sportsman and well, you know where I'm talking about. Why am I, that just went out of my head. Not Wyatt, is it? No. Yeah, anyway, 16 acres of city property. We thought that the city it's not going to use it. Let's think about affordable housing, however it's defined. And we got pretty far down the path. We got some bids on, we got some estimates of the value of the property. We had a roundtable and brought in design groups to give some concepts about how to build housing in that property. And the ultimate design is still on the table, but essentially the bulk of the property, the south part of the property would stay natural and with all the ecological concerns. And then there would be some affordable and low market housing available at the north end, right on the intersection. Well, the citizen group that lives in the neighborhoods adjoining that property did mobilize. They did come to Hall, and it's still in process. Now, I'm not going to judge whether they are right or wrong, but they started with no housing. We live here. We like it the way it is. And they're very powerful. It was one of the reasons I lost the election. Sarah Blossom, who was recently defeated, has been an advocate for two. But there were two council people who came forward, the person who I lost to, and her mentor, Ron, who were opposed to doing anything with this property. So that's a case where it goes both ways. Now it is, as I say, it's not over, but I'm terribly upset about the fact that this is dragged on and dragged on and dragged on. And it's not necessarily given us a better solution, because the cost of housing, everything changes. But that's one example of, and an important one, I think. The other has to do with the non-motorized. The idea that we want to get people out of cars into public transportation, walking, and you'd be surprised. This is an island. This is a city where almost everybody has to have a car. If you live in Winslow, no. But if you live in the south end or the north end, you pretty much need a car, at least in your garage, even if you can figure out a way to get around. So trying to move legislation forward to devote more funding for wider and safer road shoulders has terrible opposition. Even though the non-motorized community supports it very much, you'd be surprised how many people think, oh no, I don't want to pay for that. That's just, I'm not going to add to my car tab fee, or we proposed 1/10, I don't know what we did. A small amount of money to pay for, we put a bond issue up and it was defeated, I don't know, 2-1. It was amazing. And you think, wait a minute, this makes sense. So the current council wants to be ecologically green. It wants to get rid of internal combustion engines. It wants, it's doing all this stuff. But so round and round we go. If I sound a little frustrated, I'm not. I'm excited is what I am. But and both of these issues are still vitally important. But it is a process part that does start with neighborhood or coalitions opposed to something they hear the council doing or wanting to do. And That's just how we have to face the music. And so, Brenda, if you're on, good luck. One other thing about the way the council works, I'm sure you're aware under the open meeting law that the council cannot meet in greater than 3 at a time unless it has an open meeting and puts it on the record. So it means if you're just wanting to talk about something between meetings, you can't do it with more than 3 council people. You can never have that 4th person in a meeting. And you can see why this is important. On the other hand, it's amazing between the weekly meetings how much the need to have that communication is there among council and staff. And the COVID has put a new light on this because, in fact, the state legislature has to meet online, and there's a whole notion about how do you have open meetings when you're Zooming? How does that happen? How do you work? How can I come as a member of the public? And I'm not sure how it's going to end up, but it hobbles the ability of a council to work well together. Many people on the council never met the other person until they were elected. But until we, as it kind of goes back to my earlier comments about getting to know what your colleagues are about and what their history is, you're going to work better. And so this is an impediment, a big impediment.
Well, and it sounds to me a little bit like it kind of circles to what Sal was talking about.
Yes.
Which is the idea that it's important for our role is informing our neighbors so that it gives sort of a background of, so we don't end up at that decision-making point with somebody stopping everything at the last minute. There's more clarity around the issues that are coming before the council. And part of that, certainly journalists play a role in that. And we need to find new ways to be journalists. And that's one of the things you guys are doing, but also all of us can play a role in that.
Well, one of my points was I did not make very well, Reed, was maybe there is a plurality of residents who do not want affordable housing. Where was the organized opposition to what the people who lived in Commodore and Commodore West were saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Richard.
You know, I've started looking at a lot of these issues through the lens of kind of the history of Bainbridge Island. I've been kind of a fan ever since I got here, from the logging days and the Port Blakely days. And, you know, I just love that sort of stuff. The Historical Museum is one of my favorite places and groups of people. And you can also look at where we are now and where we might go based on sort of the history of the island. One of the reasons I still stay here, even though we've become sort of a gated community in a sense. Lots of houses in the 650 to 1.5, not so much available, you know, at the lower levels. And then rents, of course, go up proportionately to those taxes. So I sort of look at it as it's still the old thing about Winslow versus the island. There was well, what year was that? 1991 or 92 that Bainbridge actually became a city. Otherwise, people that lived not in Winslow did not consider Winslow part of Bainbridge Island. And then people in Winslow did not consider people out in the woods to be part of Bainbridge Island. It you know, that is, in a sense, almost never changed. There's a vestige of that. And then the other thing is people, I've always been mostly out of Winslow. People out of Winslow are really interested in land use issues. They're really interested in sort of practical things about trees falling on their houses. They're really, you know, that sort of thing, how the roads look, etc. People in Winslow, and I've lived in Winslow. I had a car that I never used because you really can live your whole life down in Winslow. It's pretty darn convenient. Their issues are totally different. I still see that. I still see a lot of what goes on. I happen to like old islanders. I like the old island thing, people from old families. They don't know if they have any money or not. They know they've had this house for a while. They live a certain way, which is kind of charming to me. And I don't begrudge people who've moved here from other places who want whatever they want. But I actually think those two forces are still with us. And it's always going to be largely driven by economics. I mean, that's just true. But what's interesting about our current council, and I have a lot of disagreements with them, is that there's a bunch of good people on that council who will take a non-economic view towards an issue. They won't say what's the dollar value to the city. They won't say, oh, we shouldn't bother. And if you in a sense package your issue the right way, I agree with what Rita was saying. You package your issue the right way, you'll get a hearing. You absolutely can get to these people.
Anyone who has not had a chance to speak yet, who would like to throw their 2 cents in?
I do have a question. How do you think the commuters pay attention to the island council? Has anyone ever asked that?
Yeah, what is it like for the bedroom community folks?
Yeah, well, yeah, and how people, when I commuted, I can honestly say that I didn't know what was going on, and I probably didn't pay attention because I had 3 kids and I was busy. And so how do you get people that commute involved? Some of them are really high powered.
I think you need.
I guess there isn't anyone.
Sal, I was going to say one of the things that, that's one of the areas of organizing that might be sort of the future of what we need to look at is the idea of thinking about, I don't know, having something to talk about in the galley when we get back to getting together at the same time. And certainly this idea of the internet and the connections that we're all learning to make because of COVID mean that there may be ways to attract people. I remember I worked for a while as a volunteer at Bainbridge Community Broadcasting. We were trying to think of ways to get people to take that podcast with them. And podcasting, as Sal and Richard are learning, is becoming a little more popular thing. And especially if it can operate as a two-way or the beginning of a two-way conversation, the beginning of a broader conversation. Anyone else have a comment or a question? Thank you very much, Mickey.
I'll just say,
Well, I'll comment on the
the idea to have, you could go over the agenda. Like if you just downloaded the agenda for the city council meeting once a week and you just scan the agenda. If you looked at it over the course of a month, I almost could guarantee you that you'd find something that would interest you. And if you sat down with somebody that could take you through the agenda, you'd probably find 20 things that interest you. And then if you downloaded the agenda packet, your mind would explode because you would get to see on a granular level, like how much the cleaning crew gets paid and if that's reasonable. And so you can start to really see how the wheels turn at the city level.
And you can get that delivered to your email.
Can you? I didn't know you could get the agenda.
Yeah, you can sign up and get the agenda delivered to you off of Kobe's website.
Oh, I'm going to go do that when we're done with this.
All right. Yes, Anne. You're muted. You have to open your microphone.
It is.
There we go.
It's very small. I guess
the microphone. Yes, it's even as small as the camera.
It's very small. Okay, one thing I've really thought we needed for a very long time was some kind of regular course, like the police have that academy where you can ride around in the car with a police guy and it's several times, and you get a sense of, well, this is how the police department actually functions on Bainbridge, and it's very surprising for a lot of people. Well, I would love to see a regular ongoing thing like that about how city council works, how democratic government works, because having been on a number of committees and the groups that look into things like affordable housing, or I really had a huge learning curve, as I think most of us do, when we discover, as Brenda said, you get really hampered. You can't do this and you can't do that, and you're not allowed to, and oh, that covenant and blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of what feel like roadblocks. It's also really interesting to see, as Sal pointed out, that you can, or somebody, you can have a lot of push from one group that gets heard a lot quicker than others. And there's a lot of people who don't know how to make their case. I'd say some of those older island families that are sitting on incredibly valuable property don't really know how to protect themselves, or are, we've all seen maybe some of those unfortunate things. I would love to see some public education on property values and a democratic process, how the council works. Maybe all incoming council members should have training. An 8-hour, in-service sort of thing. I don't know. But I feel like having this island be run by volunteers who are essentially untrained is not perhaps in our best interest. It got us where we are. And you know what we say, our best thinking got us here.
That is enough to scare us for the rest of the week.